So hello everyone, welcome in 2021. My name is Jakub Polaczyk. I'm the Vice President of the New York Dance and Arts Innovation and Artistic Director of the Chopin and Friends Festival in New York City. And we have today a pleasure to have a talk discussion with a wonderful composer, Professor Reza Vali, who teaches at the Carnegie Mellon University, who was also my teacher. I did artist diploma with him when I was in Pittsburgh for 2 years, in 2011 until 2013. And he's with us. He's originally from Iran, from Tehran, but he studied in Vienna, also in Europe and in Pittsburgh, composition PhD, and he's for teaching for many years composition at the Carnegie Mellon University, but also has a project with the Persian music. He'll tell us a little bit about that and also about his recent time. So hello, Professor, nice to see you.
Hello, nice to see you, Jakub.
Happy
New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, the same. A lot of creative energy for this year. Professor, tell me, how is Pittsburgh now? How is the situation now in Pittsburgh?
Well, we are still in lockdown, and we are in quarantine, and we are trying to, just get used to it. I and my wife have been in quarantine for almost 8 months now. And so we have, and we are trying to, adhere to the rules and, do the social distancing and carry mask and so on. And so I think so far, so good. And I hope that soon the vaccine will be available and everyone will be vaccinated, and we will, everything coming back to normal, hopefully. So.
Yes, but also the situation now in Pittsburgh regarding the teaching situation. So tell us a little bit about Carnegie Mellon University. Do you have students in person, or you are teaching everything virtually, even their lectures? How is it going?
Yeah, I have been I taught everything online. I offered all my classes online. And I was teaching 2 courses. Each courses had 4 sections, and each section it was online, and the students they logged in, they linked in with Zoom, and it went very well. Mm-hmm. I turned our living room to a classroom. I brought my whiteboard from my office. Although Zoom has a whiteboard, but I don't like to work with that whiteboard because it's very clumsy, basically. And so I brought my own whiteboard from my office. And so if there was any examples, I would write on the whiteboard. Even I got very good on just drawing, the staff lines at the end of the semester.
Like Stravinsky.
At the end of the semester, I was just doing very straight lines,
Five lines, right?
Right. So anyway, for me, it was a good experience because I think this is possible. Mm-hmm. And this might be the future, really, because also not only you can, one of my students was from Bogota.
So that's Colombia.
Yeah.
Bogota.
He was in Colombia. I mean, he didn't come back. He is a student at CMU, but he was at Carnegie Mellon. But he was told not to come. He couldn't travel, so he was in Bogota, and I would teach him in Bogota. So in other words, there is a new wave of teaching. There's a new window. This COVID-19, it's a terrible pandemic. But, in every bad thing, there's a good thing. What we learned was that we could actually go international on teaching.
So in this point, it's a help, But I see that you have a great library at your home. So can you see a lot of scores next to you? Because I see a lot of books there.
Yeah, there are a lot of scores. All of those are the scores. These are books. They are on this side. This is all folk music, all folk music. I have been
collecting.
I have been collecting folk music for 30 years now. Now I have run out of space. I don't do that anymore because I don't have any space. Watch, look at this.
I see that.
There is no space. And now what I'm trying to do, and I am encouraging the companies to put everything online.
For collection, so how do you collect that? Do you also do transcription by yourself? I'm just curious. I would like to ask if you sometimes transcribe by yourself.
No, I mean, when I was very young,
you did that.
When I started that, collection, I was doing transcribing. But then when I left for Europe, I was still collecting folk music by just electronically, So cassette tapes, I have a lot of cassette tapes, a lot of actual reel-to-reel tapes. And then later on, everything was on CD, and now everything is online. I think gradually, I hope that, people who produce, like if you see those large, okay, this is 17 hours of folk music. It was produced in mid-1980s, basically, mid-1980s or beginning 1990s in Iran. And these are very valuable. Each of those has like 8 cassettes inside of it.
Right. But I remember when we had composition lessons, remember, Professor, when we discussed this handwriting issue with composers, remember? That is a very huge connection with the note that you put on the paper and the note that you put on the computer. Because nowadays, we as young composers, we are very digitalized somehow. We have PDF versions, right? We write in the computers. Some composers use hybrid versions, so sometimes like a little bit handwritten and then on the computer. So, but what do you think about this digitalization in composition process? I like classical composition, I mean, what I mean.
Well, my first, that Carnegie Mellon, where I work, is the center of computer. It's one of the best, computer scientists. The first thing that I told my colleagues when I was working there was, we have to actually create a software hardware that you have electronic paper, and you have electronic, notation, and you go with your hand and you write. And instead of me going, on here, see, this is
the mouse or something else.
Well, look here. This is the process that you do. You play a note, and then you go to your computer. You assign a value, and then you play another note. You assign a value, and then you go and you assign, the triplet and so on. This is not how we compose. Let me give you something. A lot of composers compose on piano. I don't compose on piano. I'm not a pianist. When you're composing on your piano, I think if I compose on piano, which I have never done that, it actually puts me into a vertical position because I have to think vertical. I don't think vertical.
You have 10 fingers only.
First of all, you have 10 fingers.
Yes.
Second, it actually forces you to think vertical. I think horizontal. So I work with the computer programs that you can have 1,000 tracks. You can have many tracks that are going at the same time that you can create, and you can bring. Not only that, I can tune them. I've been working on micro-tuning software for many years, and I'm happy to tell you it's very soon is coming out.
I remember you mentioned that, yes.
That it actually lets you to you tune your instrument even on it will be on your cell phone.
Yes.
And you just assign it, and you assign it to. So I work with lines that are moving polyphonically on top of each other, and they are not equal temperament. I can't use this system anymore. What can I use? Technology. This is how the process goes. You use technology for creativity, but for production, I use only notation for production, not for creativity. Because when I sit on the paper, I have to actually. I think with my fingers. You don't think just with the computer mouse. You think with your fingers. You think with your 10 fingers. You're thinking, and your body is connected to each other. And unfortunately, computer actually takes that from you. And I think it's not good for composers to compose on the computer. That's,
I understand, completely understand. Yes,
you know,
I understand the point. And I have to tell you also about it can help to hear those microtones with the electronics. But I know the composer who has two pianos, two keyboards with microtones. He is using two keyboards. The one, like, you know, like Ives had this piece, actually, you know, this Ives piece for the quarter tones.
Right.
When you have two pianos, and then you have 24 pitches. But, you know, this is only about 24 pitches microtonals. But if you use different tuning, it's a problem in this case. Interesting topic. But we are talking about now this Iranian Persian music. So because you've been studying this for so many years, right? And you have so many resources. And we are talking also about the somehow national schools, like we have in Europe, of course, national school with the national music, like with the Chopin was working all the folk elements and was trying to put it all the creative, like mazurkas, for example, right? Very miniatures. So tell me also about your approach to folk music. Also, maybe first about the history in the Europe. History like Chopin, for example, maybe Janáček, Dvořák. Tell me about this. What do you think about this approach?
Let me tell you how I actually got into folk music. I read somewhere when I was very little, 12-year-old. I was at the conservatory in Tehran, 13-year-old. I read somewhere that a Hungarian composer named Béla Bartók was collecting folk music. I didn't know who Béla Bartók was. But this idea of collecting folk music really appealed to me. So I started collecting folk music. For many years, when I went to Europe, I was actually collecting folk music. I'm not a musicologist. I never was. I'm not. And I was just collecting folk music. I never used that, to be honest with you, until really just the last year of my studies at the Hochschule
in Vienna.
In Vienna, yeah.
In Vienna.
Yeah. So I wrote a piece called 4 Persian Folk Songs. And remember, I went to Europe at the height of the modernism. So when I wrote this piece, it was a piece. It's a very simple piece. It's based on very simple folk songs. It's a 4 Persian folk song, but the piano is very complex. And so it's very atonal and complex. It's like it's basically a technique that you call collage. So there were, I was just surprised how people like this, and it has been multiple times performed. It's one of the most performed pieces. So this is how I started composing, music that was based on folk music. I started doing more and more. And then in the 90s, I broke away from modernism. In the 80s, my style was modernistic, really. But in the 90s, I broke away from modernism. I started, doing a lot of folk music, working like that.
Professor, do you remember the piece that was the turn? Do you remember the title of the piece that was very important for you and you try to think in a different way?
I discovered, Persian classical music. When I was studying folk music, I started studying folk music. I, never studied really folk music. I just collected it. When I was studying it, I realized that no matter where you are in Iran, Iran is a huge country. So from the north, from the south, they all have the same elements. It's like they're all children of the same mother. And I discovered that the source is the Iranian system, the DM system. DM stands for Dastgah Maqam. And when I discovered that, it was like, discovering a new continent. And, and then I was wondering why I was not taught this music, When you went to the conservatory and you were taught Chopin, you were taught the music of your own country, Jakub. When I went to Conservatory of Tehran, and I was taught Bach and Beethoven. I was not taught the music of my country. Do you know what I'm saying? That's a difference.
I understand, yes.
You know, and I had to actually relearn and actually completely broke away from the European, system in 2000, just like 21 years ago. I completely broke away, and I started writing music completely based on the Iranian system. Iranian system is a very peculiar and very unique system in the entire Middle East, because it's not one system, it's two interlocked systems. One is fairly young, it's about 19th century, it's called Daskal. The other one is fairly old, it comes from the 8th century, and it's called Maqam. And also the Maqam is shared with our neighbors, like with music of Iraq and Syria, and and everything like pitch, intervals, rhythm, form, all of these, I just didn't use it. I started going, and in this process, I actually came back to the concept of folk music. And I started, and it was one thing that I wanted to tell you was really a very, very interesting and kind of eye-opening for me.
But I'm thinking now also from the perspective of Chopin, for example, whose music he took for the mazurkas, and he changed very much, but we always hear that there. And when you hear the original music, it's very interesting because it's for Polish, it's based from that, but you can very hardly find the source so easily because it's hidden. It's hidden so much with the ornamentations, which were sometimes actually not so much Polish, are typical for the style of the composer and typical also for the other influences that come from the imagination, So it's like a blend of many things at the same time, yes. But when you hear the real folk music, it's very pure. Pure in the sense, it's like it's a one color which doesn't have the others. It's very just pure, like a pure water, like a spring.
What if you as a composer just use the mazurka in its purest form?
No, this is very difficult task.
I know it's very difficult.
Extremely hard.
I know it's extremely hard. I know, this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah,
I'm using folk music in its purest form. And you're just going back to the roots, because you see why? And also something else I in this process, my process is a creative process, but something that I found out is, Jakub, folk music is the most international music that you will find, because any folk music that you hear, doesn't matter where is this, is it in Poland or is it in southern tip of Chile, you will find elements that they share. In the music of Native American, in music of Africa, in music of Asia, in music of Siberia, in music of Poland, in music of Iran, you will find this. And that makes the folk music the most, not only is the purest form, but it's also international.
And many composers were against that, like from impressionistic or symbolistic. So many composers later went against that. And also modern music actually is going against that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this idea of that we have to take this music and put it in a European form, it comes out of the 19th century tradition, really.
But also the ornaments, a lot in Chopin music are so white, like in Asia, sometimes you have 20 notes outside the 3 notes, which is irregular. So it's completely not Polish, completely not from the Polish tradition. So we hear it's still Polish, but there's elements completely we cannot find there.
Exactly.
So there is a mix of things.
Therefore, Bartók, using material of folk music, and he going back to his Beethovenian tradition, to his root, by using elements that is outside of either first Viennese school or the second Viennese school. In fact, his idea, in my opinion, is actually a reaction to the second Viennese school, which was against folk music. Our job, when we are working with music that it's coming from the culture, okay? First of all, you know, you are going to a culture that is closest to you. Okay, I cannot come and use a Polish music like right now. You know, everybody is just taking some element of everything and putting it together. You know, that's not really close to, because music has to do with feeling. Mm-hmm. And the closest to it is where you are born, basically. Okay. So your music really, you know, and I know from your music has everything in your music, Jakub, goes back to Poland.
It does.
Okay? Everything goes back to Poland. Mm-hmm. And there is something you cannot actually prevent it because it's your DNA. Same thing with me. I mean, it's everything that I do goes back to Persian music. Okay?
Because you, as a teacher and as for so many years working with so many students, so many composers, also judges, last year also you attended the jury of the competition we have here at the festival. Can you distinguish which country this piece might be? Because how is your feeling? Sometimes nowadays, sometimes it's harder to distinguish which country this composer comes from, because it is more, I would say, more globalized, the language of composer. Do you have the same feeling?
Not necessarily. No. I mean, for me, look, I'm not against any language.
Mm-hmm. But
for me, music has to be good. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what language it uses. Okay, so in other words, if a composer write ultra modern piece, but it's a good composer and I feel that it has something to say, has a narrative, that's fine. You know. It doesn't matter what language you're choosing.
But can you distinguish the score? Maybe it's from, maybe that was a Japanese composer. Maybe that was Spanish, because you don't see the names. Can you think about this?
No, I don't think about that, because the thing is, you know, music is an international language. But I have a question, and I have a question for all my colleagues. Mm-hmm. If music is an international question, why that international language? Why that language has to be European? So in 21st century, I am hoping that we go back to PI, mm-hmm. Parallel interconnected education. That means you're teaching a Persian, musician, okay, mm-hmm. who wants to actually learn also European music. You teach them Persian music according to tradition.
I understand.
And then you teach them European music according to the conservatory tradition. That's what that was established in the Paris Conservatory. Okay, in 1795. You know, this is an incredible tradition. You teach everyone with their own tradition, and you go that parallel. So that's why we won't have a spaghetti anymore.
That's right. But you know, Reza, I have thinking, because music is a language. It is a language. It's also the different, very different language. Composer who were writing many times for operas, the best, they were always thinking parallel, which means there was no boundary, and they were always thinking the word and the music in the same line. That's why it was unified, but they were never thinking music separately, words separate. It was one, because they were thinking parallel. So why don't we do that with the same musics, with the different musics in the same way? The best artists, I always go with parallel, always.
Exactly.
That's the best artists, always.
If you see the parallel education, I think in 21st century, a lot of things going to happen. And I hope I will be alive to experience it. Because, it's an amazing century that we are, going to change. You will have orchestras that will have, we have Chinese instrument, we'll have, Indian instrument already starting. You know about the Silk Road project.
Yes, I know.
Yo-Yo Ma started.
Yes,
okay, so this is the way that the future of music will go. When I came to USA, I saw, well, there are 30 different contemporary music. It's from Harry Parch to Ben Johnson to people from California to minimalists to Steve Reich to this is all contemporary music. So contemporary music is a spectrum. You're not going to be put in one box. You know, you can think out of the box. And this is what I told the students. I said, think out of the box, get out of this box. Contemporary music is, I told them that the spectrum of contemporary music is as big as the circumference of the earth. So the music is an ecosystem. It creates its own ecosystem. You have to have Persian music. You have to have Polish music. You have to have what we call folk music. You know, without this, we won't have music. We have to have religious music. We have to have, you know, music of church. We have to have Orthodox. We have to have, you know, Catholic. We have to have this music, okay? Music is thinking, music is feeling, music is what you actually give. You have to have a narrative, and your person who is listening to you has to take this narrative. Okay.
Yes, but I'm also thinking very much, sometimes it's a portrait of ourselves. Me as a composer, I'm thinking very much when someone hear my music and they will see me, that they will see my gestures, they will see me because, for example, we are like photographers in our life, that we actually put the moments and we put ourselves in those notes, and they're not just the notes, you know. And that's why robot will never do that, because the robot doesn't have personality, and computer can go very complex, but won't have this individuality that we are talking now about individuality, you know, originality.
Absolutely. I believe in that, because you see, because the most important for a composer is you know, as you said, because your composition is a reflection of you.
Yeah.
If I listen to a music of a composer and I cannot identify the composer, if something is missing, you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because music is an international language. Musicians don't have fatherlands. Musicians, they actually belong to the world.
That's beautiful sentence. We have to quote it. No fatherland for musicians.
Musicians don't have fatherlands.
No, beautiful
sentence. You see? You know, not a single culture is a super culture.
Sure. You know, and Reza, I'm thinking now, because we can choose some of your sample of music to hear for our listener.
Well, how about, I have another idea. How about a little bit of my Nydai concerto?
Your name, you can say a few words if you can say about this piece. Which year and for whom did you compose? So we are talking about a concerto for Ney and orchestra, right?
Right.
It was the Endless. That's the title.
Well, the Endless Plain.
The Endless Plain.
Yeah, it's called Toward the Endless Plain. It was composed in 2006. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, 2003, 2004. So, and I wrote it for my wonderful friend who is actually a bassoon player, but also plays all Iranian wind instruments. Mm-hmm. And his name is Khorsow Soltani. He's the soloist. And it was a double commission from a joint commission from the Boston Modern Orchestra and the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. Mm-hmm. And it was performed in 2006, in March 2006 in Boston. And then the year after, in 2007, November 2007, it was performed in Los Angeles. So, mm-hmm. And the piece is the title of the piece, and also all the essence of the piece is based on a poem by Iranian modern mystic poet. His name is Sepehri. Mm-hmm. And you know, it describes, you know, that the poet is hearing a voice that is calling to itself. You know, it says, you know, toward that endless plain that is calling me to itself. That is a very tradition in the Eastern philosophy, and it's called the state of nirvana in Indian philosophy.
Yes, in nirvana.
And in Persian philosophy, it's called the unification with the divine. Mm-hmm. And this is the call that this poet, and the poet becomes a dervish, basically. A dervish in the Eastern philosophy is somebody who is actually seeking the truth. And that's where the word dervish comes. And so he's moving through different stages. And the orchestra is always describing the environment of the seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And the dervish is always is represented by the ney. And when you start hearing the piece is the today, the state of violence. It's just, you see violence all over. The beginning is extremely atonal. And then you hear the sirens at the end.
Siren, I remember.
Because the sirens means the fear. It means fear, war, violence. And this is what the seeker wants to get away from. And he actually moves through different stages. The first stage is called passage. It's very, very sad because the seeker is so sad about this, world of violence, that he wants to go and arrive at peace. And so gradually the music changes and becomes very Persian. And the entire piece
metamorphosis, I would say.
He metamorphosed, and then at the end of the music, at the end of the piece, he actually arrives on the endless plain. So
but that's wonderful. We'll hear that first movement, but also, so you have some kind of program in this music, because this music reflects something from the poem, right? Because it has some kind of program behind the music. And I'm thinking, when I was listening also, I was thinking about the use of the orchestra. It was like a landscape. You said about environment. It was landscape about this person, one person, and experiencing what is here all around him. So the space of the musical world is in the orchestra, right? And here you have this kind of soul. That's how I felt this when I was listening to this piece. So I was right. I was right in this sense.
You were right. Yes. And so
I didn't know about your program. I don't like so much read about the programs, when I'm listening. And I was just thinking about the music,
but you felt it.
Yes.
That's my point. That's how I connect with you. Because I think that the composer doesn't need a lot of program.
Yes. Because
the listener, many people have told me, especially people with Middle Eastern origin, that they cried after hearing this piece. I did not want to have, orchestra, symphony orchestra comes and just one ney comes. And everything that happens in orchestra, it comes from what ney is saying. So it's not, the orchestra is the leader, the boss, and this is, one exotic instrument on top of it. It's the other way around. The ney is the boss, and the orchestra has to follow it.
Thank you very much for this conversation, for our quarantine talk, for all the sharing. We'll hear your music with this ney. Everybody can have own experience and our idea what they hear there. We know a little story about that, but of course, it's not the one way how we can perceive this music. This music speaks by itself. And so we'll hear this first movement from this concerto for ney and orchestra. And I wish you all a lot of good energy and inspiration also from composers, creative talks in this year, and also using the digital world in a very creative and wise way, as we talk about this, how to do that.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
you.